So, how would you sum your life up to a stranger?
I know that I have several times been extremely lucky.
They say you make your own luck in life, Freddie.
Some you do, but some you don't. So cut filming from. I've got the bullet in the next door. Do you want me to go get it?
Yeah.
The bullet on the chain. I mean, if we go back to this good luck, that I could reach for it. Say, for example, put that in there and reach for it. I believe very firmly I've had, over my life, extraordinary good luck.
Oh, yeah?
Be the right place, right time, met right person, or occasionally not met, for example, that 7.62 NATO caliber rifle bullet that went through my hair in an African war. Actually went through, well, I had more hair then, but I sometimes think, if the bastards didn't get me with that one, they'll never get me.
Frederick Forsyth is a best-selling author in the Western world and wrote a book which has sold 6 million copies so far. It's been translated into over 20
MI6 agent, war correspondent, and fighter pilot. Forsyth's own story. Sounds like the stuff of fiction.
Forsyth teased out a mine of expertise into a narrative of carefully engineered suspense.
Frederick Forsyth, the famed author of The Day of the Jackal, Odessa File, The Dogs of War, The Fourth Protocol.
You've discovered the secret of international success. I wondered if you'd ever been able to analyze exactly what it is that makes all these people buy your books.
Whoops. Right. We're in, so to speak. When do you want to begin?
Just bear with us 1 second. We just need to adjust something.
I'm glad you weren't in charge of the invasion of Normandy in 1944.
You would still be...
Yeah, it's somewhere on the beach.
Okay. Great. Right, let's start at the beginning.
Yes, okay. I came from a very small one-horse town called Ashford in Kent. In Ashford, during the Second World War, almost all the children had been evacuated.
It's goodbye to the cities and danger areas, and not forgetting their gas masks. The children head for the special train.
So I had no companions of my own age. I played, therefore, by myself. I was also an only child. If you are an only child, you invent your own games, which fires imagination, and you tend to become self-sufficient. It might have seemed that I would be destined to take over my father's shop, but my dad said, don't do what I do for the rest of your life. Frankly, it's boring. Go and see the world. I got a scholarship at the Tunbridge School. My dad couldn't afford Tunbridge School, but with the scholarship paying for 95% of it, he could.
Ready?
Yep.
When you're ready, press play.
That's Tunbridge School. Yep. I didn't have a very happy experience at Tunbridge. All my contemporaries were the sons of doctors, surgeons, lawyers, bankers, and my father was a shopkeeper. I was relentlessly bullied. Schoolwork thrown all over the room, bedclothes on the floor, pushing and shoving, punching. I longed to leave. But back then, it was stiff upper lip, don't make a fuss. And that caused me to withdraw into myself. I would shut myself away in my cubicle and close the door. The habit of solitude became very ingrained in me. But at 16, I was skipping school, taking the secret flying classes, and then a tiger moth, and looping over the Medway estuary. And then I would go back to Tunbridge. Had I been discovered, I would have been expelled immediately. Since I was a boy, I wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force. Ashford was right underneath the Battle of Britain. And I remember, I must have been about 3 years old, standing on the lawn of our house, and my father's khaki-trousered leg next to me. He was staring upwards. In the sky were Spitfires and Hurricanes flying against the Luftwaffe. My dad revered those young men. So, naturally, I wanted to fly a Spitfire too. My dad was a powerful influence in my childhood. I thought he was an extraordinary man, a remarkable man. I worship my dad's memory to this day. When I said at Tunbridge that I was going to leave early and join the Air Force, I got an awful lot of schoolmasterly opposition, a lot of pressure. Eventually they sent to my father to try and talk him into talking me out of it. And one after another, they lectured him, very much from on high to down below. And Dad, God bless him, just sat there and listened to this. And when they'd all had their 10 minutes each lecturing him, he delivered one single sentence. He said, "Gentlemen, if my son wants to become a British fighter pilot, I'm going to give him all the help and encouragement that I can." And then he got up and walked out. Oh, yeah, I remember that. 3 years of struggle, from 15 to 18, and I finally got it. The wings of an RAF pilot on my chest. My parents were about 10 feet away. I know they were very proud that day. Dad really was bursting. Yeah. I did 2 years national service. And after that, the question arose, are you going to sign it on in the RAF, or are you going to leave? I wanted to be assigned to a supersonic squadron. I was told rather pityingly that I'd be commanding a desk. So I left.
I just want to show you this letter you wrote.
I completely forgotten this. Why I do not want to sign on in the Royal Air Force. Oh dear. In the Air Force of today, as I have seen it, there is far too little scope for energy, enthusiasm, initiative, drive, brains, or talent, or any of those qualities usually associated with success.
Harsh words.
Yes, they are. Don't forget, I was an only child, and only children do tend to be sometimes a bit self-obsessed and don't understand why anybody else should not subscribe to their rules. So that can create problems in life.
Is that you, Freddie?
Yep. Yep, definitely. I thought, what the hell are you going to do now? I know, foreign correspondent. I'll be like those men that there used to be in Dad's paper when I was a boy. I got a job on the Eastern Daily Press in Norfolk. And there I learned journalism, to keep it accurate, how to interview, how to track down sources. Damn good training in the business of accuracy. But I wanted a much bigger map of the world. So I went down to London and I hawked myself around Fleet Street. I was rebuffed at every single door. And I ended up in a bar, and a middle-aged man on the same bar looked at me and said, you're pretty fed up with my boy, what's the matter? I said, I'm trying to get into journalism. Oh, he said, why don't you come with me and we'll cross the road. I'm with the Press Association. But as soon as he learned that I spoke French and German, he said, you want Reuters? And I started in Reuters, Paris office. Oh, wow. This is the French press card, which I would flash when I wanted to get access to somewhere in Paris. Paris is always very lively. I'm enjoying life. My flat was just near the Moulin Rouge. So I had a girlfriend after girlfriend after girlfriend.
What was your brief for Reuters in Paris?
I was covering repeated attempts to assassinate the President of France, Charles de Gaulle. The extreme right wanted him dead, so it was a very tense time to be in Paris. I managed to find a bar the extreme right wing frequented and sat nursing a beer. They drank too much, they got loose-tongued, and I listened.
And that was plotting to assassinate the president?
Yeah. How and when and where and who. Reuters was suddenly advised, that I suspect, by British officialdom, to get me out of Paris.
How old were you when all this is going on?
22.
That's pretty young.
Yeah. So I was transferred to the communist hell of East Germany. After the building of the Berlin Wall, the Reuters man was the only Western journalist left east of the wall. Room bugged, bedroom bugged, office bugged, my phone was bugged, so I was living under a microscope. One was followed everywhere.
How much did you tell your parents about what you were really up to?
Not a lot. Mother would have worried. But then Mum would worry about anything. If I crossed the road, she worried. I went back to London to join the BBC, doing reports for the evening news.
Mr. Joe Mears, the chairman of Chelsea Football Club, who's also chairman of the Football Association, has declined to be interviewed about the whole matter.
And someone said, will you go to Africa for us? I said, I don't do Africa. And they said, oh, come on, it's only a week, maybe 10 days. Fly down there, file a report, fly back. There's been an outbreak of civil war in Nigeria.
5 million Igbo tribesmen in Nigeria's eastern region, Biafra as they now call it, have declared independence. This is a cruel war with modern weapons, in its way as cruel as the war in Vietnam.
And having got there, I discovered that what was going out on the BBC was complete rubbish. Absolute nonsense. It had nothing to do with the reality of what was on there on the ground.
What were they saying was happening?
Oh, that the Nigerian army had swept through the rebel territory defeating the Biafran army at every step. In fact, it hadn't happened because the British government was supporting the Nigerian dictatorship. So if the British government said this isn't happening, the BBC would say it isn't happening. But I reported what I found. We're a news-gathering organisation, or we're nothing.
This is the town of Ore in western Nigeria, the town that the Federal Army said they thought couldn't be taken. Well, it's been taken by the Biafrans. They moved in this morning, consolidated their position, and moved even further west.
And that's what the BBC didn't want to hear. They wanted to hear that Nigeria was winning hands down. And that was all they wanted to hear. The Foreign Office accused me of bias. I was summoned to London by the BBC. And I said, I think I'd like to go back. Oh, he said, we have a policy of not covering that story. I said, oh, well, unfortunately, I don't. So I'm off. So I resigned. Well, very shortly afterwards, I was sitting at a cafe in Camden. A man walked in and looked around and looked at me and then walked over and then took the chair opposite me and sat down. He said, I'm from so-and-so, and we really need a man, or an agent anyway, right in the very heart of Biafra. They wanted to hear what is going on. Are they likely to continue resisting? Are they collapsing?
You've been a little bit opaque about this gentleman.
Oh yes, I've talked about MI6. So I went back as a freelance foreign correspondent. I got myself attached to the Biafran army.
Do what I told you. As I said.
Covering the story from the Biafran side. But also as an agent for MI6, getting real information out of this now completely surrounded enclave. The Nigerian army put a circle round Biafra. They stopped all food supplies. I remember I was sitting in my hut in Enugu, the capital of Biafra. I looked out the window and there she was on the lawn. And she had a little brother by one hand, and she raised her other hand with a gesture, I'm hungry, give me food, tapped her mouth. I tried to explain, I didn't speak a word of her language, the Igbo language. I hadn't got any food. And she just nodded, as much as to say, yes, I understand. And turned away and led her little 3-year-old brother off into the bush, the jungle, where I knew they would die. And I just went back to my chair and I sat down. I leaned my head forward onto my forearms and just burst into tears. It was one of the very few times that I've ever wept as an adult.
This one is the elder brother.
To be so helpless made me angry. Angry with the officials supporting it as a policy, who could have stopped it if they'd wanted to, and they insisted that the denial of food continue. One has to ask, how the hell do they sleep at night? Back in London, they had no flat, no car, no money, no savings, nothing. With a huge question mark over, what the hell are you going to do now? And I didn't know. And then I hit on this weird idea. I'll write a novel. I had an idea in my head, and I'd had it in my head for 7 years, since Paris, when I'd covered those repeated attempts to assassinate Charles de Gaulle. And I thought at the time, if the extreme right wing really wants to kill him, they might succeed, thought I, if they brought in a professional assassin and paid him to do what they can't do. I was crashing on the sofa of a friend in Chelsea. When they left for work about 9 o'clock, I would settle down at the kitchen table. And I just tapped and tapped and tapped and tapped. I set myself a ration of 10 pages per day, and I did that for 35 days. It's 100 to 1 chance it ever could be published. But the 5th publisher I approached, Harold Harris of Hutchinson, said, it's very interesting. I'm prepared to take a risk and publish it. And he said, I'll offer you a 3-novel contract. Wow, it's like paradise, 3-novel contract. So I thought, wow, and don't forget, this is a writer who hadn't got tuppence to rub together. But there was a problem. I had not a shred of an idea to what novel 2 or 3 would ever be about. I just didn't know. I'd only ever planned one. What I'm writing tends to be quasi-factual. I thought, well, I know about the post-war Germany, because I've been there. And I know about Africa, because I've been there. So I wrote a synopsis on each, the Odessa file and the Dogs of War. The Odessa file is about the uncovering of a Nazi mass murderer in Germany by an investigative reporter. And the Dogs of War was about a mega-rich mining magnate engaging the services of half a dozen mercenaries to topple a West African dictator. There were 6 mercenaries in Biafra. I got to know them all. Harold Harris said, I want Nazis by next year and Dogs of War the year after. Well, that was a pretty tight schedule. So I said, okay, fine, I'll get stuck in immediately. And he gave me an advance, which I could then use to fund the research into Odessa file. I love accuracy. And so I'd go to a lot of time and trouble, traveling and traveling and traveling in the preparation of my novels. And if you're going to describe something, get it right. And I went down to Vienna and got in touch with Simon Wiesenthal, the great Nazi hunter.
ODESSA, the organization of former members of the SS.
And I said, I'm writing a fictional Nazi concentration camp commander who vanished in 1945 and has never been seen since. And I remember Simon saying, well, why invent one? I've got real ones. Which one would suit you? And eventually, I arrived at
Roschmann.
Edward Roschmann, the butcher of Riga. There was an extreme right-wing movement in Germany, and the Odessa had penetrated the establishment. It had members high in the police force and in the Ministry of Justice and the civil service, and many of them had been involved in mass murder. So I went undercover in Germany to pretend to be a young Nazi fanatic. And I went to secret meetings.
That's a kind of a dangerous place to put yourself.
Yes.
Did you enjoy it?
It's challenging to pretend to be what you're not or not to be what you are. But while I was researching and writing the Odessa file, they launched The Day of the Jackal with a print of 5,000 copies. And it just exploded. It just went completely crazy. The reorders came in buckets. We got to a point where they had a backlog of orders they couldn't fulfill because the printing machines wouldn't work any faster. And then the Americans came in, and the Japanese came in with huge numbers.
So how did you feel about that?
Bewildered. Bewildered, yeah. But by then I was so deeply involved in the subsequent novels, researching and writing, the Odessa File and the Dogs of War.
Frederick Forsyth developed in the Jackal the magic formula of mixing fact with fantasy. The Odessa File and the hunt for Nazi war criminals.
The Odessa File is Frederick Forsyth's immensely successful follow-up to The Day of the Jackal.
Very shortly after, they made a film of the Jackal. The director stuck to the story absolutely like glue. They retained the title. And since then, it's become embedded in the lingo as an assassin. Oh, yes, the watermelon. Then the checks began rolling in.
Rumor has it that you've made your first million. Is that true?
So it's rather a large amount of money, I'm afraid. It's not afraid. Not sure I'd be afraid. It's a large amount of money.
I'd never need to work again. I didn't want to. But I was still writing all the time to finish Dogs of War. I bought a farm in Spain. And then I married Carrie. She was 27, came from Northern Ireland.
The Forsyths are, in a way, just the sort of couple that Freddie might have invented.
A good-looking, bronzed former war correspondent.
Good God.
Married to a very attractive model, and both ideally happy.
And then my wife being Irish, she said, why don't we go and settle in Ireland? So I bought a house in Enniskerry in County Wicklow. Both my sons were born there. And Carrie and I lived there for 5 years.
There aren't lots of female characters in your books.
No, that's true. It's a diversion.
If it was absolutely necessary for the development of the plot that X and Y and Z happen, then I would say this and that happen. But where the hero or villain is simply taking an afternoon off, I feel I can go on to when he takes up his real activity, which is probably killing somebody again. And as for the women characters, they've quite rightly been described as cardboard cutout figures. And this is true also. I can't describe women.
I see. Why is that?
I don't understand.
We've got that much in common at least.
You too?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you know who you were actually writing for?
I possibly do. He's probably a middle-aged man. I'm not being sexist. I just think that if there's someone out there saying, that's what I want to hear about, tell me about this, it'd probably be a 47, 48-year-old business executive who's getting home tired at night and wants to put his feet up and a nice cup of tea and read a story that will interest him because it's reasonably factual and hopefully accurate.
Now, Miles Copeland, you helped to set up the CIA, and how close did Frederick Forsyth come to the literal truth?
Well, first let me say that I think it's a first-rate novel.
I couldn't put it down. A little short on sex there, Freddie, but
We can't have everything. Yeah, he did some research on this, which I just don't believe, because I don't understand. In fact, I think I'm going to take this up when I go home. Some of my old colleagues must have told him things I had no business telling him. Some of the things that he had to say in there about how these things are run are absolutely 100% authentic.
I want to talk a bit more about your relationship with MI6.
Yeah.
I imagine it worked both ways.
Yes.
And how often did you carry out these kind of errands for MI6?
Can't say. Sorry, can't say. Really, I can't say. We were in Ireland for 5 years and then returned to London. But I couldn't work at home. I'd be constantly disturbed, interrupted. If I'm trying to write something, I mean, that involves a lot of inner thoughts. And sometimes just sitting staring at the paper or the typewriter, getting those thoughts. And then someone comes bursting in, oh, shut up, gone now, it's gone.
Is being a writer compatible with family life, Freddie?
Writers have a part of themselves that is shut away and not available, locked in this thing, this bone dome called the cranium. And even in company, there's part of you that's still detached. Not easy to cope with someone like that. And Carrie and I grew apart. And she eventually said, this isn't working. Would you leave?
Your first wife parted with you partly because of your writing?
Well, I don't know whether it was that. It wasn't, I mean, I never tried to be obsessive about writing, and I think really I didn't probably put in more than 9 to 5. But anyway, no, there were one grew apart.
So what do you think you've been like to live with down the years?
I don't know. It's a judgment only other people could make. Someone looking at you.
But you've talked about a certain requisite detachment that writers have.
Yeah, I think you have it. If you want to be a writer, you must have it. Someone might say that's a very cold sort of attitude to life. I think for a writer, I don't think it's an option. So I moved from London to the country in one fell swoop. But alas, wife number one didn't like the country at all. So it didn't work. And the boys would come out to visit me weekends. And I mean, it must be very, very traumatic for children to see their parents part. I'd been apart from my first wife for a year when I met the lady who became my second wife. And her name was Sandy, and within, I think, a fortnight, she'd come out to share my life at the farm. So she moved in and we married 4 years later.
What are those?
These?
Yeah.
I sucked little tablets to remind me not to shove a cigarette in there. My wife, Sandy, disliked it. She said, you've got to stop, you've got to stop.
Were you a big smoker?
Yeah, about 30 a day. Yes, exactly. A lucky escape with no shadows on lungs, no cancer. In 1991, Dad was, he was ailing, but my mother had died, so he'd been alone for 2 years, and very, very much feeling alone, because they were very deeply devoted for 45, 50 years. I had planned to go on with my then very young wife, Sandy, to the Caribbean for a holiday, and he said, you will absolutely not cancel. Anyway, we went, and I think the third or fourth day there, a voice came on the phone, and it was his live-in carer to say that he just died. It was not unexpected, but it was a wrench. I wouldn't have gone if he hadn't begged me to go. I hope I was a good son, because you were certainly a bloody good father. But I think he would have said that I was, and certainly we both had a very, very good relationship, very close. So anyway, all families have losses. What am I going to see?
A man who pleaded guilty to fraudulently misleading financial regulators before his company collapsed with debts of £34 million has walked free from court. Roger Levitt was ordered to do 180 hours community service and banned from being a company director for 7 years.
Among his clients, the author Frederick Forsyth, disgraced investment advisor Roger Levitt left court after admitting lying in a vain attempt to keep his company from collapsing with debts of £34 million. He said he was distressed.
He was an investment broker. He informed me that I now had a big holding here and there, with that company, that company. It was all fiction. He'd forged all the documents.
As a bankrupt, I am unable to repay anybody at this time. But it is in my mind to morally see if I am able to assist any of these losses.
Lying shite.
Years ago, the flamboyant salesman was listed among Britain's wealthiest people.
Well, there was never the slightest intent on his part to reimburse anybody.
So how much did you lose, Freddie?
Everything I had, about $4.5 mil, which was about everything I had.
So hindsight's a wonderful thing, but he does look a bit dodgy, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, sly bastard, yes. But I don't, I trusted him. I thought he was a friend.
There's an irony there, isn't there?
Yes, I mean for someone who's been involved in a few deceptions, albeit hopefully always of bad guys, I have been in my life much too trusting. Silly. Not very clever. Thought crossed my mind to use my dubious contacts to get him punished. But then I thought, no, it's not I'm not that tight. At 50, I was bankrupt again. Everything I'd done was gone. And I had to start all over again. Traveling and traveling and traveling, researching and writing novels. I visited an extraordinary number of places until the last time, which was Mogadishu. After that, Sandy said, enough's enough. Well, you're 75, you should not be visiting any more of these insane places where you could get your head blown off. So kindly stay at home.
So have you given up writing now? Have you retired?
I have retired, yes.
But you have said you've retired many times before.
No, I haven't actually.
Are you going to retire from writing, as you could well do?
No, I'm not working on another one.
No.
No, I said I've no intention of writing any more than 3. I was contracted to write 3, and I've written 3, and that was all I ever wanted to do.
You have said to me before that the next novel will be the last one.
I've said it to my publishers, they still don't believe me.
How firm a resolve is that?
No, it's absolutely firm. The prospect of the next 40 years bottled up in a small whitewash room tapping away
2 forefingers at a typewriter appalls me. But I'm sure what most people watching will want to know, are you going to write another book, another thriller?
Ah, well, that's a different ballgame. I don't think so. As far as I'm concerned, it's been 10. 10's a nice round number. 10's, I think, when the curtain comes down, as far as I'm concerned.
Frederick Forsyth, thank you for the good books.
And I've said I'm thinking of it many, many times, mulling it over. But I think the last novel, 7 years ago, I hadn't thought to write that. But I could stay in this country to research and write it. But now I have retired. I can't stress that enough. I'm retired. Socializing is pretty restrained. I do occasionally go out, but it's got to be a good reason now. Unfortunately, just lost my wife after 36 years of marriage.
In recent times, she'd been unwell, I think.
Yes. She became very dependent on medication, and she simply suffered a health collapse. And the downward spiral just refused to reverse itself. And she finally passed away. I can get emotional about those things, but I tend to prefer my privacy if I'm going to be emotional. Shut myself away. I'm not going to go and blab on the high street. Sandy wanted a very quiet cremation, very short and dignified, and it was. She wanted it actually scattered where her babies were scattered. The only babies she ever had were Jack Russells. She had no children, didn't want children. It was here, underneath this tree. Sandy is here.
How does it feel to be on your own again?
Lonely. But I have lots of friends, and people have written and emailed and telephoned and sent their commiserations. And so I'm not alone in the world. It's just that, well, I live alone, obviously. And I shall not, how shall I put it, change that now till the day I die.
Perhaps you could write again.
I might. I need peace and quiet, which I get too little of. I'm going to have to sit down soon. Give me help me hand back. Whoa. The year 2025 yawns before us. I've got the story in my head. And it's yearning to get out. Unfortunately, the only way to do that is to write.